Now, we've all heard of Apollo 13, the great space rescue, we're told. What very few people are aware of is that the day after the official launch of Apollo 13, which was April the 11th, 1970, it was an Apollo 13 launched. The day after that, an Apollo command module was recovered from the Atlantic Ocean by the Soviet Navy, who were conducting naval exercises in the Bay of Biscay, which is west of France and north of Spain. It's an area of sea which is quite well known. It's quite rough at times. The Soviet Navy found this floating Apollo command module. Hadn't been reported missing. What was it doing there? Why hadn't anybody reported it missing? Was it missing, or was it the real Apollo command module which had to abort its flight because it was way off its official flight path? From Florida, it would fly out over Africa. And they would look out for the Eye of Africa, the Richat structure, so they know they were on the correct course. They would then fly on over Africa, down towards Australia, back up to America. That's the official flight path of any Apollo launch. So what was that command module doing floating in the Atlantic? And there are pictures of it on the Russian craft that recovered it. The Russian craft took it back to their headquarters at Murmansk, the headquarters of the northern Russian naval fleet. And 6 months later, in September 1970, an American Coast Guard cutter, the USS Southwind, was visiting Murmansk on an official visit, and the command module was handed over because the rule amongst space nations is that anything recovered from another nation's space program is to be returned to them. So the Soviet Union, as it was at that time, returned this command module to America. And there are photographs of it on the foredeck of the Coast Guard cutter Southwind, which returned back to its base near Baltimore. And that command module is now on display at the Grand Rapids Museum in Michigan. But it's sealed. Nobody can look inside it. It's sealed as a time capsule to be opened in 2076, the 300th anniversary of the founding of America. Quite an appropriate date. But there's another Apollo 13 command module on display at the Kansas Cosmodrome. What's going on? This is the only Apollo mission where 2 Apollo command modules are on public display. And there was a film made of it, starring Tom Hanks, directed by Ron Howard. It's a very good film. And that film was all filmed, every single frame of that film was filmed here on Earth. But it gives a very good impression of what it must have been like to fly in space. Make-believe smoke and mirrors would be your first port of call to find out how it was all done. So the question remains, what was an Apollo command module doing floating in the Atlantic Ocean, the Bay of Biscay, the day after the official launch of Apollo 13? Nobody has satisfactorily answered that. They've said things like, well, it was a boilerplate. It was a practice command module. Yes, there were boilerplates. This is BP-1227. Boilerplate command modules were used for practice of getting in and out, being recovered from the sea, but it hadn't been reported missing. You'd think something like a boilerplate, if assuming it was not the official Apollo 13 command module,